Chapter 9, Edmund Walcott's Castle. Caleb Weaver, he's the man who built the house, or had it built. Dana's father read from a library Xerox copy, which is just like a copy machine. Built in 1856, which is when the Massachusetts Emigrant Aid Company sent his family to homestead out here. Dana's mother was driving their rattling 1978 Honda on their way to the Thoreau Middle School spring musical, the last blast of the school year before they were sprung for the summer. Dana asked, "And what about Mrs. Weaver?" Her father scanned the paper. Nothing on her. "Mr. was a lawyer, though." Dana's mother said, "Mrs. was what else? A wife, a mother, a cook, and a maid?" Things were pretty set in their day. Women weren't blessed with 2 full-time jobs like they are now. She was a speech clinician at the Kansas School for the Deaf, and she could sign as well as she spoke. Now she flashed a few heated signs at a driver who was turning left without a signal. I'm glad I don't have to translate that into the listening audience. Val, you're crawling up his back. He's a creep and a terrible road hog. Dad, do you know if the little room was in the original house plans? Can't tell, but I doubt it. It sounds like the house was a lot smaller. It had just 2 bedrooms upstairs, or 1 bedroom and a loft, and another bedroom downstairs. No 3rd floor, no rooms in the attic like we have now, and no indoor plumbing. Of course not, Dana's mother said. Mrs. Weaver hauled raw sewage outside in buckets every day, gave her a hard body. Women didn't need to work out in health clubs back then. Dana's dad laughed and jiggled a bit of his wife's extra padding. They were solid religious types too, I'll bet. Quakers. Does it say that in the diary? Dana's father was dying to see it, but the time still wasn't right. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet because the writing's really hard to read. It's small and close together, like Mrs. Weaver had one little notebook, and she had to make it last. Oh, look, Jeffrey, that's Edmund Walcott's house you were telling me about. I can't believe they're going to tear it down. Dana ducked to get a better look. The house was a limestone castle, looming 3 stories above the jungle of a yard. A lot of the windows were broken, and whole chunks of limestone were eaten away by wind and rain. From the back, a tower jutted up like the kind that Rapunzel would have flopped her golden hair down from. Each of the upstairs bedrooms had a balcony big enough for 2 persons only, with tattered awnings sheltering it. Check out the front door, Dana's father told them. It was 2 levels high, triple wide, and knobby with intricate carvings. This guy was loaded. A cattle baron, I read. Dana said, I'm surprised you didn't make us buy this monstrosity and turn it into a bed and breakfast. Follow along, please, people. Yeah. I really hate to see it torn down. Don't get any ideas, Jeffrey. Mrs. Shannon gunned the engine as the light changed to green. Was this house around in Elvira's time? Who? Her mother asked. Our dead body. Ann and I call her Elvira. Doubtful, her father replied. It looks like 1870s vintage to me, not 1850s. And besides, Edmund Walcott didn't move here with the first wave of settlers. So he never hid slaves? Or owned them? Dad, do you think our house was a station on the Underground Railroad? Her father wriggled his grayish beard and settled into his history professor mode, eyes 100 years away, fingers stroking his forehead. Well, it's unlikely. Both the known stations in Lawrence area were outside the city. There was one over near Lone Star, just southwest of here, and some Major Abbott person ran a hot spot about 5 miles south of what used to be the southern edge of Lawrence. Most of the activity was in Topeka or Leavenworth, though. But suppose Elvira came to the house on her way north. Say she ran away from a plantation. More likely she was the weaver's servant. Dana shook her head. Not a chance. Olivia, put that away. Well, what makes you so sure, Miss Expert on pre-Civil War conditions? Her mother asked. Oops, she just missed clipping a station wagon on her way into a tight shoe parking place a good half-mile away from Thoreau. Why do I let her drive? Because you have 2 speeding tickets, Dana's mom sweetly replied. Dana said, I'm just sure Millicent Weaver wouldn't have had a black servant. I think she got sealed into that room. Dana, that's horrible, cried her mother. Go with the theory. Why? I don't know yet. See what you can find out at the library, Dad, and I'll do my own research. She watched her parents exchange glances. It was the she's following in your footsteps, Jeffrey look, oozing into the haven't we done a fine job of parenting look. I have several of you not following along. My expectations are that you follow along. Period. Her mom and dad communicated so well. With a click of the tongue, a shorthand language undecodable to outsiders, a simple tap of the finger that signaled annoyance, a burst of laughter when everyone else was wallowing in misery. This was how marriage was supposed to be, wasn't it? So how on earth did Millicent Weaver keep such a big secret from her husband? Later that night, Dana turned to a page in the journal that troubled her so much every time she read it that she'd not been able to read past it yet. May 14th, 1856. Caleb's representing Barnaby Watts. What does representing mean? What does Caleb do, Grant? He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. So he's representing a man named Barnaby Watts. What does that mean?
It means that he's representing him in court to help him win.
Right, probably defending him somehow, right? Who's been charged with helping a Negro escape. So we know Barnaby is a white man who's been charged with breaking the Fugitive Slave Act, the law, right? But thou knowest full well what Mr. Weaver's saying outside the courtroom. The man's in flagrant disregard for the law, Millicent. The law is clear. The slave owner has every right to get up a posse, ride into free territory, and if he can prove it's his slave, take him right back to the South. Every right. Deuteronomy, Caleb. Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master to thee. Yes, yes. And Isaiah 16:3. Hide the outcast. Betray not him that wandereth. Yes, yes. So Millicent is quoting the Bible back at Caleb, saying it's actually right to hide to help the slave, because he's being treated poorly and he's a slave, which isn't right. His eyes filled with such agony that I wanted to pull him to me, but I didn't. Oh, Lord, I didn't. I despised the sound of my own voice. I said, well then, Mr. Weaver, how can thee possibly represent Barnaby Watts in the courtroom? Millicent, thee knows I'm torn. On one side, there's God's law. On the other side, man's law. And thee's pulled on thy reins and backed away from God's law. As soon as thy words were out, my face was hot with fury. For 14 years, this man and I have shared bed and board, and how little we know one another this night. That's what Millicent wrote, okay? A tear dropped to the page, and Dana quickly flicked it away so it wouldn't soak into the ancient, thirsty paper. She wondered what it was like for the children, James and Rebecca, to have to keep such a secret from their father, to live in the stifling atmosphere of the strain between their parents. Maybe it was quickly resolved. Maybe in the next page. She made herself turn the page and flattened it to the left. The handwriting seemed different, as if a good many days or week had passed since Millicent Weaver had made an entry in the journal. Dana took a deep breath and read the cramped script. But then the afternoon of May 21st, the fire swept through the house and blew all our personal agonies aside.